Hey, 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 land of YouTube. Let's try this again today. Yesterday, I read the whole chapter from my book, Fully Committed, The Sacred Sojourn of Now. And somehow, 16 minutes in after I had read the intro to The Artist's Way, it stopped. I don't know why. This week is all about safety. And that was what we started talking about. And The Artist's Way as the weekly theme. I just wrote a blog about it, which was delayed by a day, but that is the way it went. So I'm going to now start reading the chapter on what I made the title The Con of Freedom, Fabians, Entities, and My Crazy Journey to Clarity. This is chapter 23 out of 28 with an intro and an epilogue. So I hope that you will enjoy. This is a longer chapter. I am on the final review in the finalizing of the manuscript that will be submitted today, and I very much look forward to bringing this to you in print through Balboa Press. So here we go. Since the con video game kicked off in full gear, we've lost sight of who the common enemy is, and in the process we have turned on one another and ourselves, calling some sheeple and others warriors, and many other names in between. But what if the truth is that our common hue is only one aspect of the man I tie my identity to, and we're being called to untie our self-image from all the labels, statuses, titles, and entities we've been trained to believe make us any more or less than anyone else? What if we started to see how the pretend self is the mask we were wearing before de facto governmental bodies tried to impose unhealthy mandates onto people who complied because we've been lied to about who has our best interest at heart? What if we started to see the core identity underneath the image we felt safe enough to show the world, our pretend identity, was actually our sacred, empowered self who remains ever connected to the sacred nature of the universe? And what if we started to see the universe as the one song we are all singing along to? When we start to see that our power stance is in the questions we are willing to ask and the space we are willing to hold for the answers to be shared, we can take the pressure off ourselves to have it all together or seem to have life figured out. In a court of law, questions are more powerful than answers that a trained man or woman can ask details about that would make it seem our word was not our bond, the way we claim it is and then stick with. Opponents will always try to knock us off balance by sending us into a not now moment where the legal fiction lives, but questions are how we get back to the moment where all power lives. I remember when I heard the call to become a life coach after switching programs in university, without a clue what to do with an English degree if becoming a teacher wasn't my goal. When I discovered the term life coach, I felt the resonance of truth and purpose within the role and knew that it was for me, but my age and inexperience made me feel ill-equipped to fulfill that call. And when I received higher guidance that said I could smoke weed or coach, but I couldn't do both, I punished myself for choosing to continue a habit I knew wasn't good for me by not packaging my services in a way that could truly serve. As a result, I just gave away all that I invested, a lot of time, energy, effort, attention, money, to learn and experience, and I failed to package my goods in packages people could purchase and work their way through in a structured way. This book is proof of the change in me this process has helped me come to. I hope my honesty and transparency is helping you to take the masks off and be more real too. I devalued myself and what I had to offer because I was acting against my higher wisdom, willingly, and share this now because it's precisely what the con video game requires players to do in order to steal our power. Each time we don a mask because an outer authority figure told us we have to, we automatically place ourselves in the dysfunctional creative spectrum of obligation and irresponsibility. The functional alternative is constraint and freedom, but even that we must now consider from a deeper level. Freedom is an externally based experience we either have or don't have. It can be taken away or given to us by choice or force in the domain we are in a virtual reality. In a virtually based reality, this is literally the www.url within the public domain of the internet, where the one who owns the domain also gets to censor what is shown there, how it is presented, and how engagement is rewarded or condemned. Freedom is an illusion. Being free, on the other hand, is an experience that we feel. It is a verb used to describe an action, state, or occurrence that predicates something in a sentence, which is where we have to start looking deeper into the words themselves and why lawyers are required to article upon graduation for a period of time. Article, any of a small set of words or affixes such as an, a, and the, used with nouns to limit or give definiteness to the application or a member of a particular or distinctive kind or class of things. This process is so taxing to the man or woman acting as a devil's advocate to win the game. They are forced to release all shame for their actions as a professional in the name of winning at all costs. This is also where the cream of the crop rise to the top and secret societies choose their next board members, like the Fabians Society does, which uses the symbol of the wolf in sheep's clothing that I inadvertently mentioned in the crazy tale I wrote without knowing the covert connection I was making. According to the Macmillan Dictionary of Historical Terms, the Fabian Society is named after the Roman general Quintus Fabius Maximus, who employed delay tactics against his enemy to drain them of energy and resources to avoid pitched battle, but secure victory nonetheless. The name is meant to imply the rejection of revolutionary methods and the belief that universal suffrage will eventually result in socialism after a process of educational and legislative advance. The Fabian Society's aim of reorganizing society by the emancipation of land and capital from individual and class ownership and the vesting of them in the community for the general benefit is a dangerous proposition to and for us all. For this reason, the Fabian Society is a supporting pillar of the Whose edict you'll own nothing and be happy, with what we're given back from what legal criminals would otherwise steal from us, with our consent, if we fail to stand up now. Edict, an official order or proclamation issued by a person in authority. It is a decree, order, command, commandment, mandate, or proclamation. At this time, I'm going to actually go live over on Instagram as well, since I believe that it would be beneficial for others to be able to tune in. So, thank you for your patience and grace in these 10 seconds. Hello, 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 land of Instagram. I am reading a chapter from my book, chapter 23, I believe, which is about the Fabian Society, freedom, and my crazy journey to clarity, including entities also being thrown in the mix. And the definition of an edict was just shared. So I'll repeat and then go on from here and hope that it helps you to really feel where we're at and why it's so important now, not a lie at all, for us to no longer buy the BS belief systems being sold to us by others. So, edict, an official order or proclamation issued by a person in authority. It is a decree, order, command, commandment, mandate, or proclamation. I come from farmers and understand the power of planting seeds. I've just been learning how to plant seeds of hope in the hearts of men and women who are called to remember we are the ones who empower the corpse and the ones working on its behalf, who will also suffer if we don't choose to do the right thing and call ourselves to account for our choices as men and women to uphold mandates that cause harm on all levels. It is time for us to call for liability, accountability, and personal responsibility for acting honorably and in good faith, which means in a way that we are able to honor and respect ourselves for the choices we have made to impact ourselves and those around us. We've been duped, deceived, to believe we must live at the effect end of the cause and effect equation, which is where we flip out of the functional creative spectrum into the dysfunctional reactive spectrum, based on the orders of the edicts we follow and who we allow to call the shots in our lives. This statement has taken on a far too literal meaning since the new program was unleashed in the silent war between the public and private, which we will be used as pawns in until we stop letting ourselves be overtaken. This war is called a mixed war that mixes us up and colors us according to laws made by men that have corrupted and converted us to think instead of feel. A mixed war is one a mixed war is one which is made on one side by public authority and on the other by mere private persons, citizens, slaves, owned by the state. The alternative is to be natives and originals, which means standing as men and women, as was intended. Earlier, I'd mentioned The Matrix is a documentary, which predictive programming requires that the rules of the game be revealed in order for the controllers to remain in honor. But what I've experienced with the implied charge against me for speaking in public without having previously declared my claim of right to remain in my private capacity with all common law, unwritten and unlimited rights reserved at all times as a woman, is that rules can and will be applied to us until we stay no more and hold the professional accountable as men and women causing harm to fellow men and women. What the legal professionals haven't wanted us to know is that we can correct any mistakes by lawful notice once we're aware of the true rules of the game and how we've been converted into something less than we truly are, so long as we cause no harm and keep the peace. Fraud, such as the professionals are upholding, is a threat to the well-being of all life and must now be called out and corrected by each of us. There is great power in numbers when our emotions are in check and we can create instead of react. Getting locked up in 2019 for reporting the truth to the authorities I thought were supposed to protect and defend the public from criminals I had come to see were no different from the criminal rings I was trained to believe they fought against. I soon learned the biggest difference lays in the legalities and jurisdictions where everything is relative. Jurisdiction determines who gets to apply their rules to the players of the game. So until we claim the right to be lawfully, not legally, self-governing, we are subject to the implied laws of the implied governmental bodies we must pay mind to, and every election we vote in gives them authority over us who agree to be represented by one who can speak for those under their riding. The men who agreed I needed a psychological evaluation that day were protecting and defending the corporation they pledged an oath of allegiance to. I didn't believe I was causing anyone harm, but I was telling an inconvenient truth that was dangerous to me and my family. But it took me until now to see their hands were tied while the lies still ruled the roost. I hadn't even considered the Mental Health Act to be a threat back then. But given all I went through with a sound mind and pure heart, though tainted by fear and lower level emotions that put me on the defensive, I got to see a manhole hidden directly in front of all who see the open secret the system and its legions are committed to defending. After experiencing how the professionals turn the tribe against the individual to isolate and influence its prisoners firsthand, I had a lot of resentment, resistance, and regret to get over in the years since that turning point call that I'm glad I made when I did, for all it revealed and forced me to heal before the insanity went public. Were it not for that experience, I would have been far more trusting of the professionals than I am now, or even joined their leagues as my training had all prepared me to do. We must be mindful that not all realize the harm compliance and need for promotions is causing healthy and free men and women who feel trapped by the lies. So we must be full of care around those paid to deceive, unsuspecting souls to believe lies in their indoctrination, brainwashed them to buy hook, line, and sinker. We must be full of care around those paid to deceive unsuspecting souls to believe lies their indoctrination brainwashed them to buy hook, line, and sinker. This is the final review before it finally gets published. So I appreciate you would like to actually have me looking at you, but I'm going through the final read of the manuscript before I submit it. So if you want to stay, by all means do. I'm going to keep reading through. So I appreciate you're confused, but the attention is on the script, and you are welcome to pay mind or not. But I wish you well either way. So here we go. I'm keeping on. We must be mindful that not all realize the harm their compliance and need for controlled emotions are causing. I think I already read that part. I got distracted. See, this is why. If you allow distractions in, you go off track. And in Outwitting the Devil by Napoleon Hill, that actually is a tactic that is used to keep men and women weak. So if you haven't checked out that audio program, I heard it on YouTube and very much value that. So I would encourage you to see why not allowing ourselves to be sidetracked by others' wish for our energy, attention, time, money, and effort is very important. And you can be naughty all you wish, but that is not why I am here. So thanks, but no thanks. And we wish to be especially careful around those so used to committing fraud against men and women converted into lesser things by their trade that they'll try to move false claims forward with impunity, like the man trying to convict my person of an implied violation of the Reopening Ontario Act, which was unlawfully evoked by a de facto government who have overstepped their jurisdiction, knowing the men and women acting on the court's behalf karmically. When the masses discover the rules I'm doing my best to lay out for you here. In the implied violation that called me back to life, the man current lie acting against me and every other man or woman involved in this trespass on my rights have shown themselves to be acting in bad faith, which is a legal term generally defined by the Supreme Court of Canada as conduct involving malicious intent or that exceeds the limit of discretion reasonably exercised that is evaluated on a case-by-case basis. In contrast, good faith is defined as honesty or sincerity of intention, and in a legal context means that parties must not lie or otherwise knowingly mislead each other about matters directly linked to the performance of the contract. A contract and an agreement are actually different, for one is in common law, which is unwritten and unlimited when uncapitalized or unhyphenated, compared to when you are under the law that is written, you are then contracted into a form other than the original, which is free flowing, compared to an agreement which can be worked through. So, which is where our cultural propensity toward pro-social lies, lies intended to benefit others, has systematically destroyed our faith in one another, starting with myths like Santa Claus, the Easter Bunny, and the Bible. As mythical examples, we sell the young to acclimatize them to a culture that promotes lies. The higher we climb, the ladder we're taught gives us power. Every lie gets exposed eventually. And while we've culturally encouraged some lies, often referred to as white lies for the sake of innocent fun, we believe won't cause much harm, it's time for us to recognize that a half-truth is a full lie that destroys faith and trust we can no longer afford to tell. We need to read the fine print before committing ourselves to contract with entities that will hold us to it if we don't know the Santa Claus. Tim Allen's movie by the same name actually offers viewers a secret that most overlook because we aren't commonly told black magic only works if the rules are made available in plain sight. That way, those causing more harm can use the excuse of plausible deniability to say they acted in good faith by warning the public without also informing them that no contract is binding if one of the signing parties are not fully aware of the details. The man acting as prosecutor in the implied charge against me pledged his allegiance to the Bar Association nearly 3 decades ago and is a professional bully knowingly trying to cause harm, loss, and fraud against me and the others who got nailed for speaking at the same event in 2021. Except I am the only woman remaining standing because the others all hired representatives to handle their affairs for them. I tried to help others understand how doing so made them wards of the court, who are deemed incompetent to speak for themselves, which is an experience I experienced, and will not surrender myself willingly to again. But the method I am using is untried and untested, so I did not push it or try to change any minds. My own testimony will speak for itself on October 31st, 2022, when I stand for myself, fully present as a woman in my private capacity with all common law rights reserved at all times, as my lawful notices have already proclaimed without acknowledgement, which means they were accepted. To proclaim something is to declare what one considers important with due emphasis publicly. But given the private nature of the implied to be public court system, we will see how deep lies go as they try to hang me at every turn. Hence, it being called a trial, where the legal beagles try all to nail men and women to the metaphoric cross, where their pre-charged life stops and their new life, with a new label, would begin. It's clear to see how corrupted this system is, yet it's the equivalent of David facing off against Goliath. When a man or woman goes up against the men and women acting on behalf of a corpse that are true lie boxes on top of boxes designed to confine real people to smaller and smaller spaces, we've been trained to believe we need to pay for ahead of time in the death cult that has led us to early graves. Yet this is precisely why I am grateful to my younger self for leading us into that experience in 2019 and then for accepting the call to attend a small town rally, where I've been called to be myself fully without limitation. This is the difference between contracts with entities that limit us to what was written and agreements between people who would change the terms based in a world where our word is our bond because we live in honor. The legal beagles working for the devil don't want the general public to know this because they always set loopholes the elite know how to jump over that are set up to be traps for the unsuspecting. It's time for us to stop trying to screw one another for our own benefit, profit, at the expense of the other people, and be part of a cultural turnaround. I suspect, have an idea or impression of the existence, presence, or truth of something without certain proof. My lawful notices were not responded to in hopes I'm listening to advice from some guru and can be tripped up in court by a seasoned professional. But what the pros didn't expect was to meet a quick study like me so fully committed to being my true self despite the odds that I'm all in and not afraid to tell the truth even when it makes me look bad. Plus, I've got good people in my corner who care because they see the power of one, too. Few have faced the ugly truth the way I have and healed the hurt to see it for what it is. I'll always remember my second day as a prisoner and night as a prisoner of the mental health system, having been sent to the 10th floor of Hamilton St. Joseph Hospital, which was a nightmare experience that I am fortunate to have got to leave after only one night, but only because I have an eye for details and I believe my presence there limited the professional's ability to act freely with the others in their grips. In Simcoe General Hospital, where I was initially taken and held in a cell in the emergency room overnight with an unlocked door so I could use the shared facilities, I was actually having quite a lot of fun because they knew I was not a threat to anyone and had simply been too loose with my words in a society based on lies that tries to confine truth tellers to the fringes of society. A friend came to see me and brought pizza and tea, unsure as to why I was in there, so we went live on Facebook for some real talk of an uncommon variety. It's embarrassing to rewatch because I was ungrounded, but not overly different from my normal state, as one who dares to think and live outside of the box. One of the men acting as doctors had later told me to give him my phone, typed in Stanislav Grof's name, and told me to read all about him and his work. I'd been open about the fact I'd done 8 DMT ceremonies with a shaman earlier that year, plus a few other psychedelic experiences in order to get breakthrough at that time, and knew Grof's holotropic breathwork therapy. Knew of Grof's holotropic breathwork therapy, so presumed the man had documented his suspicion in my file. In retrospect, I suspect not. I'd got to connect with other patients and staff who benefited from my presence in that place that night and have stories to tell for another time. But I had no idea what was coming for me next, and I doubt the staff there had any clue either. The next day, a girl from the grade below me in public school acted as the ambulance driver to Hamilton with two of her colleagues. I was having fun with them and still riding the magic of the moment, presuming they would do some brain scans and tests to see what was going on, but that's not really how it works. When the three of them wheeled me up to the 10th floor, and I saw the energy pattern of this new place, I realized the game had just changed, and child's play was no longer the way forward. I was alarmed, and we'd been having fun together, so they asked if they could stay with me for a few minutes to help me settle in, but were told they needed to leave immediately. It was intense, and I don't know what the experience was like in that moment for them, but things got real for me real quick. Intimidation and denial of a patient's dignity and equality is how people are converted into patients in that place, and the professionals are trained to do it well. It's insane, truly, whereas the ones in there need presence and compassionate connection to come back to the present where they can actually use their power. It's heartbreaking to see and devastating to experience firsthand, which is why so few people actually talk about their experiences or the systemic abuse that takes place behind closed doors. Except I believe I got sent there to reveal the experience I had to heal from. In the year since, I know many others need support to do too, but not from the same trained professionals who purposely avoided eye contact with patients to dehumanize us and make us feel insignificant. Fortunately, it didn't work, and I saw straight through it because all my training helped me recognize the unspoken cues that were meant to create an emotional response that would lead to a reward of medication to placate and dull down the one terrorized by those entrusted to their care. This is the cue response reward training method used to domesticate animals and people alike. The 2+ weeks beyond this second night and day in the system, which I spent in the mood disorders program up the mountain in Hamilton, where I was sent to next, were memorable in their own way too. But this is part but why this part of the story is significant is that I realized the moment I was wheeled in that second place, it was dangerous for the soul, heart, body, and mind. So I took the time to review the two pieces of paper I'd been handed that were responsible for my detention. And at the bottom of the second page, it says, "You have the right to retain and instruct a lawyer without delay." Except that was not the experience I had, and why I have handled my affairs regarding the summons issued for my person, with knowledge of Event 201's strategy in mind, differently from those also selected for the real life equivalent of Hunger Games. I was denied the right to speak to a lawyer without a psychiatrist's permission. Once I realized the precarious situation I was in and requested to exercise this right, I realized this is not common knowledge for those outside the system because we generally don't know the deal until we need to, and by then it's too late. Because I'd incorporated my own business, traveled quite a bit, and went through two visa application processes while dating an Englishman, I knew that the full name and address need to match, and noticed the number of the road had been removed, had been missed out on the first form. It was addressed to my grandparents when my government ID was still registered to my dad's next door. Were it not for that detail, I wouldn't have contested the first form I was issued. But some part of me was terrified of getting lost in the system, so I demanded it be corrected. When I received the second form that spelled out the required changes for them, my middle names had been removed, as had the postal code. I was alarmed, especially because that second place employed many evil tactics that I followed my inner guidance to demand that second form be corrected before I was transformed to the next place, which I didn't have any idea where that would be, and was told it won't matter where you're going by a woman who seemed to enjoy the power her position gave her. This was the same woman who had come into my room to chastise me for something and then walked out, closing my door behind her to make it appear I was locked in. I had walked over, pulled it open slightly to show I wasn't going to give them the response they were looking for, and went back to writing in my journal on the mattress on the floor in my cell. She was toying with me like a cat with a mouse. What I experienced as an act was nothing short of terrorism, which is the unlawful use of violence, especially against civilians, in the pursuit of political aims. The violence I experienced was not physical. The line is fine when you already when already uncertain of where you stand socially or physically, if you don't know where you're being taken and this kind of threat is issued. I accept this sounds like a crazy story, and believe me, it was. But I will stand, affirm, and testify to its truth in any court of competent jurisdiction, common law, with men and women willing to recognize the repeating of history we're experiencing now, where Martin Amollier's poem, First They Came, is more relevant than most can bear to believe. More or less, it goes like this. First they came for those ones, and I didn't speak out because I wasn't one of them. Then they came for these ones, and I didn't speak out because I wasn't one of them either. Then they came closer to home, rounding up my neighbors, but I got nervous. And I got nervous, but still didn't speak out because I didn't want to upset anyone who might turn on me. But then when they did come for me, as was only a matter of time in retrospect, there was no one left to speak out for me, and history tells our dreadful fate. When I got out weeks later, I contacted a lawyer many in my extended family have used and told her my traumatized story of the horrors I'd experienced at the hands of the system. She met with me, listened compassionately, and suggested I get some counseling or therapy to process all I'd been through, and believed about the world she knew secrets about that she wasn't allowed to speak aloud. Her response suggested she believed me, but it wasn't a case she was willing to take on. She didn't charge me for her time that day, and I was grateful for that extension of kindness after all I had been through. I didn't understand why at that time, but now see that her hands were tied by the same system that had tried to convert me into an addict, dependent every step of the way. If I added that the psychiatrist in the mood disorders program met with me for the longest amount of time, I'd got to see him the whole 2+ weeks I was locked up, given his role was primarily to diagnose and treat with prescriptions his patients must live with the consequences of, you might be surprised by his personal guarantee. I'd been told I couldn't leave for 2 weeks after I was shipped there on the third day of my institutionalization experience, after my Form 1 had allegedly been flipped into a Form 3, which was a 2-week involuntary hold. I never received a copy of this form, which is fraudulent, but I lived and learned and now know better. After experiencing the possum effect on my third day, there, when the energy vampirism terrified me to the point of passing out in front of one of the nurses after I'd been forced to do an anal swab I was pretty sure was for the sake of the ones I suspected were keen to rape me, I realized I needed to show some level of compliance or feared they might take matters into their own hands against my will. You might be surprised to note that when I came to on the floor of the living room across from the nurse's station, shortly after, having spilled the water that I'd been holding, I picked myself and my empty foam cup up off the floor, avoided eye contact, and walked myself swiftly back to my room, and no one mentioned a thing about it. I would have thought a medical professional would have insisted I be checked out after such an occurrence, as I am quite sure it was observed, but no, I thought that to be one of many strange events while there. Knowing that would be used as evidence to reinforce the box on the form checked shown or are showing a lack of compliance to care for yourself, I decided, thank you, Tyler, it's good to see you. I decided to agree to take the antipsychotic medication the man acting as a psychiatrist wanted to put me on, but I advocated for the lowest dose possible. As a pharmacist, I know a confirmed prescription issued wouldn't impair my cognitive abilities too much. And so it was that I allowed my system to be poisoned on their orders until the evening before I was released, when I asked a nurse in passing, "Any chance you know when I might be able to get out of here?" And she said my name was in red on the board, which meant they could no longer detain me without my consent. I'm a Thanksgiving baby, so I spent my 32nd birthday locked up, and they were vague about when I was able to leave due to staffing issues over the holiday, they said. I didn't push because when your every move is evaluated in a system that wants to eliminate any sign of radical or emotionally charged behavior, you must walk lightly. But the moment it was confirmed I could leave, I declined the drugs I wished to have in my system in the first place. And the next day, when I'd arranged for friends to pick me up, the psychiatrist tried to get me to stay and told me I'd be leaving against doctor's orders, which meant no follow-up support from the system that had revealed so much about the cultural sickness of the world at present. He also personally guaranteed me that I would fail to self regulate, and when I did, I should go to the emergency room, saying too much sleep would make me depressed and too little sleep would make me manic. That was the best advice I received throughout the whole experience, because healthy self regulation truly is the safest way forward. 2 weeks later, I did get my mom to take me to Emerge when I no longer wanted to live, having publicly humiliated myself with Facebook Live videos of the messy awakening process I'd went through, while writing a book about inner peace I clearly didn't have at the time, not to mention the covert bullying I'd experienced at the hands of professionals I no longer respected, nor wanted to join the ranks of as I'd trained to be able to do, and all the other ways my former self image got destroyed in that process led me to another level of unveiling my authentic self. As you can imagine, I could go on about these experiences with rock bottom I hit months later that only the universe could have orchestrated, which led me to a crisis stabilization bed program for 5 days to confirm my hunch that the mental health system is a trap. But it's time to focus on what is presently in front of us, which brings me back to the legal system and the false claim against my person, which I now know isn't me. I recently sat with my papa to watch the movie 1917 about a protagonist, main character, who was ordered to deliver an order to the colonel in command of a legion of soldiers set to walk straight into a trap set by the opposing side. There is a scene where an officer says the only way this war ends, last man standing. But given all I've been through and witnessed as a woman with a unique relationship with words, I've come to see that we've been missing this point this whole time in a subtle but significant way. A soldier is a role filled by a man or woman whose identity gets converted into that which he or she acting as, therefore, which he or she is acting as. Therefore, while the man acting as a soldier still thinks of himself as a man, his position takes precedence and he is forced to cause harm and loss to others on behalf of the legion he is pledged to. This is why fraternities and sororities call new members a pledge, who have accepted a bid to join but have not yet been initiated. And when corporations or entrepreneurs bid on a job, we unintentionally use the same language with different implications and outcomes. Remember that in a court of multiple jurisdictions, laws are set based on precedents, where past decisions are considered as authority for deciding subsequent cases involving identical or similar facts, or similar legal issues, like the Meads versus Meads case law precedent passed in 2012 that converts any man or woman who does not know how to maintain standing in their private capacity with all common law rights reserved at all times into a status that draws them into the public domain with limited liability for the men and women acting on behalf of the corrupted crown to prosecute them, which means to institute legal proceedings against a person or organization or to continue with a course of action with a view to its completion. Prosecute is similar to persecute, which is to subject someone to hostility and ill treatment, especially because of their race or political or religious beliefs, which could be seen as a coincidence if the covert deception and corruption were not hopefully becoming clear. Returning to the infamous notion, the last man standing is the only way to win a war. We've got to see that the man's position supersedes the truth until he reclaims the right to be himself and live by the unwritten and unlimited common law tenets to keep the peace, which means cause no harm, loss, or fraud to another. Just like freedom is not the same as being free, what we've been taught to fight for is the very thing that can be taken away if we haven't owned it within ourselves. We've been deceived by the legalese and jargon that applies multiple meanings to the same words in order to confuse those who believe they understand the meaning of the word without also comprehending the implied meanings being agreed to simultaneously. There are significant karmic consequences to acting on behalf of corporations that steal time, energy, effort, attention, money in the name of being on a team going nowhere because they fail to see we are now here and it's time to acknowledge the gaps in awareness we've been overlooking within ourselves and society, lest we continue to fall into them. Before we get into the karmic implications of acting on behalf of a corrupted corpse, it's necessary to recognize that the Latin root word corpus means body, with corporeal and corporal being distinct derivatives designed to confuse and lose the majority. Any good sales training will reaffirm that if you confuse them, you lose them, because people naturally gravitate toward certainty. Recognize how the brightest lights have been deployed into the darkest places to be dulled down and snuffed out in a spiritual war we didn't know we were born into, and are here to win together as originals. While corporeal means having, consisting of, or relating to a physical material body, according to Merriam-Webster. Within legal contexts, corporeal moves beyond the body to describe things, such as property and money, that exist in the same physical plane that the body exists in, as opposed to the non-physical realm of reputations and well-being and the like. Corporeal thus applies to the legal definition of a person, which can be used to describe a man or woman, or a corporate entity, which we don't realize until we have seasoned eyes to see the lies and call for liability of the one lying. A corporation is also known as body corporate, which is an organization or group of persons that is identified by a particular name and that acts as an entity. An entity is a thing with distinct and independent existence, denoted with a proper name, which can be a corporate name or abstract thought form that accrues energy because we give it our power. What isn't commonly talked about is how each substance has an entity those using it are subject to, which relates to both drugs and alcohol, whether prescribed or of a street variety. This war of terrorism needs to stop, and community is the key, which is why ours have been and are being systematically and systemically destroyed. Systemically, in a way that relates to or affects the whole of something. Systematically, according to a fixed plan or system. Methodically. Another significant term to be aware of is menticide, a systematic effort to undermine and destroy a person's values and beliefs, as by the use of prolonged interrogation, drugs, torture, etc., and to induce radically different ideas in those who see the world differently than the way the corpse wishes us to see it. This was exactly what I experienced within the mental health system and blamed the ones in control for when they were just being used as pawns by evil they felt trapped by too. I'll always remember when I was wheeled into the 10th floor of Hamilton's psych ward, where the reversed roles of the prisoners and guards was made clear to me on an energetic level. I'd never experienced anything quite like it, but did remember hearing of the pattern in a psychology class at university. I just couldn't understand how so many were willing to go along with it despite knowing how unhealthy, unnatural, and not okay the evil is to follow. Yet entities have a mind of their own. They overtake the ones who become subject to them. The suicide entity is one such thought form that grips those who wake up to the corruption but feel trapped by it with nowhere to turn. It's why, according to Choices Psychotherapy, medical doctors, dentists, police officers, veterinarians, financial services, real estate agents, electricians, lawyers, farmers, and pharmacists are the jobs with the highest suicide rates. People serving in these positions had to put out a lot of team in order to get the position before finding out just how soul-destroying it is. And because so many feel the pressure to pay back all that went into getting the title, plus then what's required to rebuild our identity after, it all just feels like too much. The suicide entity knows how to reinforce all of this limiting BS, and for too long it has taken too many of us out of circulation early. In 2018-19, when I was in limbo with getting this book done or knowing how to genuinely contribute to this world, it gripped me too. And when the uncertainty of how things currently are sinks in, the entity rears its head to see if it has caught me in a weak moment where it can take advantage and call me closer to a threshold I will not cross. I comprehend the cost of crossing that line and want others to be aware of it too, especially because legislation bills the current corrupted governmental bodies have been passing covertly during the cover of COVID-19 has made it easier than ever to be put down if we don't feel like carrying on, and many won't want to when they find out the ugly truth if they feel like no one cares or would miss them. We need to rebuild community now, so this is not the case regardless of how close to that point we already are. Recognize that exiting the game early means coming back into a reality where you didn't do what you're here to do now, and only you can. The evil entities that live backwards know it, and they're eager to help us end our lives early so we lose our chance and one opportunity to do what we came here uniquely qualified and called for. This entity values comfort and knows every story in the book about why discomfort is dangerous, because to the existing belief systems within a polluted system, change for the better leads to death for it. It would rather we die than the limiting BS it's bought into. They're creatures meant to be in community, but the existing options have become toxic to its members, and it's up to us to rebuild without the corporate banner. When I went through my messy awakening in 2019, I said that we need to bring together all the major religions and traditions of the world to refine their stories and concepts down to their shared values and virtues. Once all were on the table, we could see their commonalities and develop a belief system that will serve us better as a collective. That's what I believe the man referred to as Jesus did by studying many of the great traditions of his time, which he then lived, without an instruction manual to do so. And in so doing, his words became the manual others based their BS and mystery schools on. What we must see is that what is written is limited because it stops growing once confined to the chosen words to define it. There is no breathing room in words, for it is the breath that speaks them that gives them life. It's time for us to become the authority of our own life by learning to feel truth, which is the difference between states of emotion and being. Energies in motion that have unresolved memories from the past take us out of the present, while presence is the experience of calling our power back to the now, where change always begins. So that was chapter 23, and I thank you for tuning in today. And if you would please leave a comment and let me know what this message has meant to you, for you, and what you're going to do with it. I very much would appreciate hearing that. Chapter 24 actually is called Originals Have No Status, because we have standing when we're original rather than aboriginal, which have status cards because the original has been converted into something, being from the original, into then a status which draws the man or woman in private into the public, which is of a lower standing because a status has no legs to stand on. And yet we think that the professionals know best because they wear suits that cover who and whose they truly are, because in the hierarchy of creation, as an earlier chapter in the book says, the creator owns the creation. So if grand overall designer, creator of all that is being, not excluding anything. If man and woman is created by the creator, and then we created the government, who then created personages, titles, and statuses, what we have to recognize is how the man or woman who gets converted into a status, thinking that it gives them benefits, is actually just because the government, which was the entity that we created in order to serve us, hence the ones working for it on its behalf, accruing the karma for causing harm, loss, and fraud to the man or woman they are dealing with and imposing unlawful measures upon, ultimately are accruing that karma. And the man or woman who becomes a person, an OPCA litigant, which is anyone that doesn't know how to say, you can't convert me into something less and create a novation, which eliminates all of the work that was done before that status was applied and the man or woman converted, which then changes the case because now it's dealing with something other than what it originally was. This is where we are falling off track, and voting for representatives to represent us as our person and be able to speak on our behalf is not in our best interest. all of this push to take our power outside of the present now moment so that someone else can do it for us is the illusion that the corporations require us to buy into in order for us to feed it our power and then think it is powerful. We need to take it back, I believe. And the way we do that is to stand as a man and woman and do so on common ground, common law, where we are able to stand shoulder to shoulder, whether we like someone or whether we do not, to cause no harm, loss, fraud, and keep the peace are the tenets of the common law, which is the unwritten, uncapitalized, unhyphenated version of the law we are all bound to until it is then converted into something other than. Once it is written, it is limited. What is unwritten and unlimited is ultimately we have to use our moral compass, our hearts, in order to navigate. But once written, we enter a contracted state, which is why it's called contract law. We must expand. It's 10:55. I appreciate you. I've got 4 more chapters and an epilogue to get through today, which is not too long. It's going to only be about 60 pages of the book. There's 236 from start to finish in the 9x6 size for Fully Committed, The Sacred Sojourn of Now, the book I am so excited to share with you very, very soon. So thank you for tuning in today, leaving a comment. I would love to know what this message means to you, for you, how it feels for you, where you feel it, because your emotions are ultimately stored within the organs of the body that your body says, that one's supposed to deal with this for me. And so it will send it there, or it will allow it to circulate and be the free radicals within the system that can cause damage if they're toxic. So we need to get ourselves under wraps, recognize the cells within us without needing to go into cells of prison states that are only applicable for personages and ones created by the fiction that would like us to give it our power in order to be powerful, when if we take our power back, well, that is how we rise. And we do so by standing as men and women. I'll have more to share very soon, but in the meantime, let me get back before noon to reviewing this manuscript, getting it done, and then to the printers, and I'll have more information soon. So thank you, thank you, thank you. I send you huge love. I hope you feel the excitement. And yes, the story is crazy, which is different by definition, but it is not insane, which is what I believe the system is, because systems are designed to save yourself significant time, energy, money, hours. And then we'll owe nothing and be happy, as I say in the chapter I just read. If you missed it, go back and listen if you'd like. You can listen at 2 times speed, and that will help save you time and still get the information. And you can slow it down if you want to go slower at points. But that's how I digest information faster. But information and actually feeling and noxus and praxis are different, as I shared in the chapter before this one that I read out loud. And it didn't take, because somehow YouTube cut me off 15 minutes into the hour read. So however that goes, we're just letting it be. And I decided to read this for thee because that didn't work. So I thought I'd give it a try today. And so say, hey, have a great day. Laura J. Namaste. Namago for today. Hey, hey, hey.